Welcome back to Rewiring Prosperity, the Lighthouse Series. Our first 10 episodes are exploring a systemic issue of women and gender diverse people really not being represented in the venture capital ecosystem. So we know that less than 5%, or it depends on the stats, sometimes less than 3% of venture capital is going to women and gender diverse people. And so, as part of this WinVC series, I'm really excited for our guest today, who is Lark Meadow, CEO and co founder of Aeon Blue. She leads commercialization of a groundbreaking seawater to fuels technology. Before founding Aeon Blue, Lark served as CEO in the social equity sector, scaling projects and organizations internationally. What makes Lark's perspective distinctive is the range that she brings: executive leadership, project development, team building, and strategic partnerships, now applied to one of the most pressing challenges of our time: building clean energy solutions that can actually scale. So, Lark, welcome to Rewiring Prosperity.
Thank you for having me, Vanessa.
So, you've gone from leading social equity work internationally to commercializing a clean energy technology. And it sounds like a bit of a significant pivot, but what's the through line for you?
So, there was a moment when my brother called me up. So, my brother's a scientist, and this was years ago. And he asked for my help with this company. And I had been working in social equity, specifically gender rights in film. And he was he was telling me about his technology and how he historically had built teams, and then they kind of fall apart because startups are hard. And
Mhm.
he just couldn't seem to get his technology or a company off the ground. So I sat down with him and I really looked at what his technology does and really dug in. And I realized just how significant this innovation was. And at scale, at global scale, what that would mean for the planet and what that would mean for humanity. And I think what's really important to understand is that climate equity is social equity. So
Totally.
minorities and those, yeah, in a lower social class overall are being adversely affected by climate change. There's farmers in the South who really rely on their crops, and they are burning their crops now because it is raining when it shouldn't, and it's not raining when it should. So people of a lower social class always take on the brunt of weather crises, of war, of water crises, energy issues. They just have less resources. So Doc, my co-founder, my brother, and I grew up in the same house. We ended up at the climate problem from completely different angles. He was doing the
Mm.
chemistry, and I was really doing the value building and focusing on, building projects and building companies. So I had spent over a decade in social impact work. I was a CEO of a nonprofit. So we reached about 6,000 people across 12 countries, and we assisted female genre filmmakers. So that's women all over the world making genre films. So that's sci-fi, fantasy, action, and horror films. And so I was also doing project development. So I scaled over 100 projects. And really working in social equity, it taught me one thing, and that is when you're dealing with in the business of humans, scale, it becomes a moral question, because if your solution doesn't reach the people who need it, then it's not really a solution. So, when you think about them being the same, and they're intertwined here, they're, absolutely through climate that it's affecting humans. Aeon Blue is really the structure where that becomes a multi-billion-dollar industry because we're producing clean fuel and we're tipping those scales.
That's so exciting. And I really appreciate your tying together of, impact and business and scale. And at the Pond-Deshpande Center, our benefactors, so both the Jerry Pond and Deshpande, I think would agree with you. It's, how do we scale impact and prosperity, and how do we really bring these solutions, like you mentioned, to the people that need it. So thanks so much for that. That was really great. So, seawater to fuels is not a phrase most people have heard before. Can you break down what Aeon Blue is doing and why it matters?
Sure. So, Aeon Blue, we make jet fuel from seawater. So, what it is this integrated reactor that combines two high energy processes. So, it's hydrogen and it's carbon capture. So, what we do is we have this machine and we take in seawater and then we split the hydrogen from the seawater. And in the same energy step, we capture CO2 from the atmosphere. What we do is
Mm.
we take that hydrogen, we take that CO2, and we put it together and we make jet fuel. And this is a fuel that you can put right into the engine of an airplane, can just drop it right in. It's what you call synthetic fuel. People also call it e-fuel. We call it Eon Air. So that's just our kind of fuel. So with this machine, we're really getting incredible efficiency by combining these two steps. In addition, we're making several other products. So every product that we make with our reactor, it's a clean fuel or a clean fuel enabler. So,
Mhm.
first of all, we get that jet fuel. And then at the same time, because we're capturing CO2 from air, the settings of the system just naturally capture a surplus of CO2 from the atmosphere. So we capture about 3 times the amount of CO2 than we need for our fuel. So we can do a couple cool things with this CO2. If we store it, that makes our fuel carbon negative. And if
Mm.
we sell it to, let's say, another hydrogen producer or synthetic fuels producer so they can make their own drop-in fuels, that makes our fuel carbon neutral. Regardless, we're pulling from the carbon debt, and that's really what matters. And then we make ultra pure water. And this is from seawater. So what we do is we bring in the seawater, we strip out the salts, we send that to our reactor, and then we make a high grade water that's used to also make synthetic fuels. And you can also use it for semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, batteries. There's a lot of different kinds of industries that use this really pure water. But instead of pulling from a freshwater source, like a community lake, we are pulling from the seawater, we're pulling from the ocean, which is essentially infinite. And then we make aerospace grade oxidizer for space travel and military operations. So it's very dual purpose. So basically, with all of these co-products, it really positions us to serve as the feedstock supply for the synthetic fuel sector, which has mandates and it has a ton of demand. And then while we're making our own fuels, and that also alleviates the pricing pressure on our fuel price. So we have parity with fossil, which is exactly what the aviation industry needs. They really need a clean fuel that has parity with fossil, that can really compete with it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I know sometimes, clean energy, there's lots of players right now, which is obviously exciting as we try to continue to move towards net zero. And what makes seawater to fuels a credible bet, and what are the hardest things to explain to skeptics?
So here's the lens that I put on that is that most people hear seawater to fuels and think that's the really wild part of the story. So because, how can you make fuel? How can you make a drop-in fuel that goes right into an airplane engine? You can also make any other kind of fuel with it. You could do gasoline, you could do diesel. There's just a lot of demand in aviation right now. So this kind of technology has been around hydrogen has been around for hundreds of years. And this kind of technology that we're using, it's been around for over 100 years. And so really what we're doing is we're taking this mature tech that is massive. I mean, it's in every country, almost every town, and we're upgrading it to include carbon capture and a few other things that I can get into if you want to get nerdy. So this is really proven science. The I think the really wild part for me is that airlines are now legally required in Europe and in a lot of other countries is to start blending this kind of specific fuel, which is synthetic fuel, and it doesn't actually exist yet at scale. So there are mandates being put into place where by 2050, about 35% of the jet fuel mix has to be synthetic fuels. So the question really is like, who's going to make this fuel? Because right now it's the supply right now is about 1/100th of 1% of what the industry needs. So
Okay.
so that's going to require massive scaling of projects. And really, it's going to require hybrid technologies that can really combine processes and get those efficiencies and basically reduce the OpEx and CapEx. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's yeah, that's I know that. So maybe I'll rewind a bit and say you're currently in our Win VC investor Q&A program with Dr. Farrell, and so I understand you're either opening a round of raising capital or about to, and what you just outlined seemed like a huge opportunity, and so if you think about the investor Q&A experience and the pitch and your round, what has that experience surfaced for you, and what's shifted in how you show up as you move into this next phase of the business?
Okay, so I feel like it was perfect timing. Dr. Ellen came into my life. So what really shifted is that, okay, so it was just a few weeks ago. I caught myself about a few weeks ago w- going into an investor meeting, and I was looking at my notes and I was planning on saying the phrase cost parity. And I stopped and I thought, I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's an obstacle word. So that's a word that makes a VC really start mentally subtracting. And so the aspiration version of what I really meant to say is superior economics, or in just the most basic sense, price parity. So it's the same fact. It has a completely different result. And so I think that's really what the Win VC program is in a single moment. Uh, Women founders, really get asked, these prevention-focused questions a lot about risk, about security, about what could go wrong. They're all these prevention questions. And as a female and having experienced social conditioning myself and having run a gender rights organization, I see that, we answer them in the language that we're handed. And as a woman, you want to establish that you do have the credibility to be in the position that you're in. And so, of course, you would want to answer the question that they ask. And this is, of course, from thousands of years of social conditioning that's been passed through generations. And I think what Dr. Ellen really taught me is that I actually don't have to answer the question. And I think it's the pivot specifically that is a game changer. Pivoting from a question to something that maybe really gets more at the heart of what they're asking, or really guides them in the way that really shows them what your vision is, where you're going with this company, and how you plan to get there.
Yeah, I like that. And I appreciate your background in gender rights. And of course, as you know, WinBC and Investor Q&A is focused on that as well. Um, what have you learned from your experience in addition to what you just outlined that may help other women that are either starting businesses or starting a fundraising round or, in deep tech?
So I wish that I had this knowledge years ago when I was running the nonprofit, because I was working with female filmmakers who were going after funding opportunities, and I was as well. And there were so many instances where women and myself really lost control of the conversation and lost control of the room in meetings with producers. And it really became a quick practice of dismissal of their stories and their credibility. So I think what I have learned, and it's just incredible because I feel like I've been looking for this for my entire my entire life, is that Dr. Ellen has really helped me understand that I can actually change that narrative. Um, so she doesn't just teach you the framework, she teaches that you have the right to use it. And I think that's the part that really lands for women founders who've been told their whole careers, to be realistic or be practical or don't shoot too far. And of course that's the cultural conditioning and it's systemic. It's just, it's something that, humans, I think, are becoming very aware of now. And I think Dr. Ellen is a part of that basically this awareness that raising our children, and this is just a natural thing that we do, is that for the most part, boys are, are praised for what they do, whereas girls are praised for how they are.
Mhm.
You know, basically a boy will be praised for, catching a football or doing something that has some sort of action behind it, some sort of agency, whereas girls are praised for how pretty they are or their clothes or things like that. So the attention, there's some interesting attention dynamics that happen, because if we're teaching boys to go get something and go do something, that's just, of course, naturally going to affect how they work and how they talk and, how they communicate everything in the future whenever they grow up. Whereas women, the attention is on them, so it basically kind of pins them. And so I think Dr. Ellen actually teaches you to pivot and to put your attention back onto something that you want to show them, you want to express to them.
Yeah, to build on that, yesterday I was at Startup Canada, the tour in Halifax, and at the end of the day, they had a panel called Men in Tech, which was a spin on the trope of, women in tech. And the moderator, she was so funny, April Hickey. She's in Alberta, and so she was asking the men about like what was it like to be a boy boss and who is taking care of their kids. I know it. And
Perfect.
like, do your good looks hold you back and stuff. Oh my gosh, I laughed so hard I cried. It was
Oh, that's so great.
it was like to do the flip of it, right? And to take it like I guess lighthearted. Even though we know that these systemic barriers exist, it's like, how do we actually find a way through? And like you said, Dr. Barrels developed a tool that people can now use to do that. And I appreciate also what you shared of, producers who are women really going out to raise money as well. And um, and the arts play a big role in the conversations that we're having. So it's really all important.
Absolutely. I wish I could send every female filmmaker to Ellen, who is, going after getting funding. So they're entrepreneurs too. And in Hollywood, the disparity it's pretty similar. It used to be for uh, basically larger Hollywood blockbuster films, about 7% so it basically, that would be the ratio. 7% of women would be directing them. And now it's dropped down to about 2 to 3. So it's pretty close to venture funding at this.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I could see so much benefit coming from this course. And I hope that it just gets bigger and bigger, because it is an incredible, incredible tool for women and for men. And for
Yeah.
men, I think that education is really important.
Yeah, I agree. So if you um think about Canada's supports for deep tech founders, what, if anything, would you change or shift?
Okay, this is a great question. Okay. So if I had the ability to shift things in the government, in the federal government, here is what I would build is that I would create essentially a single coordinating body
Mm.
for deep tech grants. So one front door, perhaps it's a small team that can shepherd a company through the system, starting at pre-pilot stage and then working all the way to commercial deployment. So it would be one application, uh, one assessment process, basically an accountable agency that can help guide a company through all of the different grant organizations. Because right now, a Canadian deep tech founder applies to all the programs separately. So it's like different forms, it's different timelines, it's different reviewers, there's different motivations. And so what we have found is, as a startup here in Canada, because we came from the United States, we were invited here by the Canadian government because of our technology. And it's very different from the US, the grant system in the US. And what we found is that there's a lot of time being spent on the coordination instead of company building. And we need all the time that we can get when we're pre-pilot, because the science is real, the science is there, but the capital stack just hasn't formed yet. So if I was able to have that kind of assistance, I think it would be a game changer, I think, for a lot of companies. And it certainly would help out Aeon Blue.
Yeah, I appreciate the front door concept because we've been hearing that a lot. I live in New Brunswick, and so um, as a citizen, as a resident of New Brunswick, we have Service New Brunswick, which is the front door to government. I can go to get my driver's license renewed or my Medicare, or, really any service that I need as a resident. And then so we've been hearing this idea, what would be the equivalent for business? And that's just in a provincial context. But I hear what you're saying about, even at a larger scale, and maybe it's by maybe deep tech needs something different than obviously like an SME. So yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah. And the grant system that is set up in Canada for deep tech startups, there's nothing like it. The amount of opportunity for support for a scaling startup, there's nothing like it. So even in Europe. And so Canada is really incredible. It's an amazing country, and we talk about this a lot in our company, that we made the best decision. Like, this was one of the best decisions that we made. It's two best decisions is forming the company and moving to Canada. So
Well, we're happy to hear that. And to close us out, what are you optimistic about right now?
I think the thing that I'm most optimistic about is our pilot. So we will be commissioning our pilot in Cape Breton later this
Mm.
year. So it's after many years of work and confirmation from national labs and science organizations. And so this is very exciting for us and for our investors. So yeah, I think that's the big thing for us. And then, of course, it proves a lot because we are partnering with First Nations, with Eskasoni Mi'kmaq First Nation. And so this is going to be the first clean fuels facility that's owned by the Mi'kmaq, and basically it proves that they can stand at a multi-billion-dollar industry. It proves that, a woman founder coming out of the social sector, can build a company to basically work with some of the world's biggest aviation players. And it proves that basically that climate positive economics aren't like a future state. They're really present day, and airlines are jumping in, to participate. And I think that that's the biggest things that we're really excited about.
And if people want to follow along in the journey, where would be the best place?
You can go to our LinkedIn. So it's Aeon Blue, AEONBLUE, or you can go to our website. It's aeonblue.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here today, Lark. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Vanessa. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much to Lark for that wide-ranging discussion today. I really appreciated the perspective and the lived experience in supporting women and in supporting women in both film and now applied to this deep tech problem. I also really appreciated knowing that a move from the US to Canada was really a great move for this deep tech business, and looking forward to hearing how their pilot goes in Cape Breton. If you'd like to follow along with Aeon Blue's journey, you can find them at aeonblue.com. So that's AEON blue.com. And you can also find them on LinkedIn. And if you're curious about the other episodes that we have planned in this podcast series, we hope that you'll join us. You can find us at pond-deshpande.ca/win-BC. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, so if you look us up at Rewiring Prosperity, either at Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts, we'll also find you there. Looking forward to seeing you next time.